On a quiet Pennsylvania road, a lantern flickered to life, and an Amish man stepped from the dark like a prayer. His name was Eli, his kindness steady as the moon. I was a doctor passing through. One night between us changed everything, gently, bravely, and forever. I didn't expect love. If this gentle story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share, so more hearts find calm, courage, and belonging today. My name is Daniel, and I practice family medicine in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm 46, and most of my days are simple. I check blood pressure cuffs and listen for stories that sit behind coughs, creaks, and constant worries. I like to think my job is not only about prescriptions, but about reassurance, the sort that refills a person's courage. If we were sitting in the same room, I'd pour you a glass of water and remind you to breathe, to feel the way your ribs expand and your shoulders drop when you exhale. Even now, as I tell you this story, I want you to feel held by it. It begins with a quiet road in Lancaster County, the moon low, the grass silvered, and a single lantern that felt like a heartbeat in the dark. That night, I was driving back from a talk I'd given at a small community center. Rural health and the importance of keeping appointments even when the harvest demands your hands, those were my themes. I'd brought a trunk full of blood pressure cuffs to give away. The highway signs thinned, and the world unraveled into farm fields and tidy white houses with curtains drawn. The GPS blinked with a weak signal. I had not planned to cut across those back roads, but a lane closure nudged me toward a narrow route I did not know. I rolled down the window and let the late summer air move through the car. Crickets sang. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once and then not again. The tire blew out so cleanly it sounded more like a slap than a bang. My sedan lurched, then steadied. I eased onto the shoulder beside a split-rail fence, turned on the hazards, and sat in the wash of their amber blinking. When you are alone at night, routine helps. I said it aloud to myself the way I tell patients, routine helps. I shifted into park, flicked on the dome light, and reached for the trunk lever. My phone showed one bar, then none. The road was empty. The sky smelled like hay. The night isn't a single thing. It's a layer cake of small sounds when you take time to hear them. The brush of corn leaves, the squeak of a bird turning on its roost, the distant rhythm of a buggy's wheels. At first I thought that last one was my own heart. But then I saw it. A small glow moving toward me. A horse's hooves measured out the road with a patience you can't fake. The buggy came into the halo of my hazard lights. The lantern on its side glowed the deepest gold I'd ever seen. The man who stepped down from the buggy was tall, his posture straight, his hat brim cutting the moonlight at a kind angle. Plain clothes, beard kept neat, suspenders. He was older than the teenagers in Rumspringa stories people like to tell, and there was a steadiness about him that told me he had made choices and kept them. I learned later he was 32. He held his lantern high and stopped a few feet from me so I wouldn't feel crowded. His voice when he spoke was careful and warm. "Evening," he said. "Are you all right?" His face was a study in calm. His eyes were blue in that clear way water sometimes is before dawn. "I'm a doctor." I noticed hands. His were strong and nicked in ways that told me he knew the texture of tools and wood. "I'm okay," I said. "Flat tire," he nodded. "I can hold the light while you change it." I've been in medicine long enough to know the way men use help as a measure of themselves. I also know how much of our strength comes from letting someone stand near and cup light while we do a straightforward thing. "I'd appreciate that," I said. We worked without hurry. He held the lantern and the beam found the lug nuts, the jack point, the bracing angle of my knee. The horse stood quietly, steaming a little in the cool air. It flared its nostrils when the jack creaked, then settled. He spoke only when necessary, and his voice never startled the night. It was as if he'd taken an oath to disturb no living thing more than was needed. When I lifted off the flat, he said, "I am Eli." "Daniel," I said, and then, because I could not help it, I added what I usually don't. "I'm a family doctor." "Thank you for stopping." He tilted his head once, taking that in, maybe filing it somewhere. "You are welcome," he said. "We do not leave people in the road." We tightened the spare, lowered the jack, and I opened my trunk to put things away. A row of blood pressure cuffs sat there like small blue birds. He glanced at them, then back at me without a question. His lantern swayed a little in his hand. I was careful, conscious of the space we stood in. I slid the flat tire into the well, wiped my hands on a shop towel, then looked at him and said, "Can I give you something for your help? Peaches? I have 2 in the front seat. No sugar on them, just fruit." He almost smiled. It was an event as subtle as a leaf lifting in a breeze, but I saw it. "I should not take money," he said, "but I can accept a peach." He waited while I retrieved the fruit and placed it on a clean napkin. He cupped it as if it contained its own little son. Lantern light gilded the hairs on the back of his hand. I wondered if he was married, if he had children asleep somewhere. I have learned not to assume. In Lancaster County, Amish families can be large, but every life is particular. I only knew he had stopped and that he was kind. "Thank you," I said again. "You are welcome," he said. "Do not drive too far on the little tire." "I won't." It felt too blunt to ask where he lived, too forward to ask if I might see him again, so I kept my doctor's mind on safety. "Do you have enough reflective tape?" "There are bends ahead where cars come fast." He lifted the lantern a fraction. "We know the road. We did something rare where I come from. We said goodnight and meant it completely." He climbed back into the buggy and the horse leaned into its harness. The buggy's wheels rolled off the edge of the hazard lights. The lantern's glow became a firefly, then a memory. I watched until that last small bloom of yellow went out, and I felt a calm I had not felt in months. I waited until the crickets reclaimed the space. Then I pulled onto the road and drove at a careful pace. The spare tire hummed a small pulse under the night's bigger music. If this were a story about chance, it would end there, tidy and comforting. But the world does not seal itself up so easily. A week later, on a Saturday, I wanted to breathe air from fields, the kind that tastes like hay and milkweed. I drove back toward that country without committing to a destination. In the office, I had mentioned peaches, and peaches became an idea. There is a produce stand at the corner near Bird in Hand where the peaches sag like warm hearts when they are ready. I told myself I had an errand, but the truth was quieter and might have looked like a wish if I set it on a shelf. The stand was tidy. Children ran past with bare feet, laughter as quick as swallows. A young woman with a prayer cap and a smile made change with an ease that told me this was her every day. I picked through the peaches the way I listened to a chest. No hurry, paying attention. I bought a loaf of bread, a small jar of apple butter, and a handful of flowers that had been tied together with twine. I was tucking my change into my wallet when someone lifted the crate of peaches fresh from a pickup bed and set it beside me. He did not look at me first. He arranged the peaches, careful not to bruise them. Then his eyes found mine with the smallest start, like a man recognizing a tune from a far room. "Daniel," he said. The way he spoke my name was simple, but I felt it behind my ribs. "Eli," I said, my voice soft in a way I use when I introduce myself bedside at night. "Good to see you," he nodded. In daylight, the lines around his eyes were written in by sun and wind. He wore a gray shirt that had been mended at the cuff so neatly you had to look twice to see the stitch. He lifted a peach and tested it, then handed it to me. "This one," he said. I did not ask about his family or his church or anything that would make him brace. I chose respect over curiosity because he had earned it with his lantern. "My tire is fixed," I said. "No more adventures." "That is good." He adjusted the crate and stepped back so others could reach. "There is a covered bridge near here," he said, as if continuing something we had already begun. "Walnut Hill. It is quiet in the evenings." "I've never been," I said. "I'd like that." He picked up a basket of beans, his hands steady. "It is good to hear the water at night," he said. "If you visit, you should park off the road." I wanted to ask if he would be there. I did not. Instead, I pointed to a small card in my wallet with my name and office number. I keep cards because they help anxious patients remember I am real. I held it out to him. "I know you don't use phones the way I do," I said gently. "But if you or your family ever need help, even just to ask about a sore throat or a fever, my door is open." Sometimes a question answered saves a trip. He took the card without touching me, which felt not like distance, but like care. "Thank you," he said. He folded the card once, thoughtfully, and slid it into his pocket as if it were a note someone had trusted him to keep. I did not expect him at the bridge. I told myself the bridge was reason enough. Old timbers, water moving, a place to stand that wasn't a hallway lined with anxious eyes and pharmacy posters. I drove there just before dusk, when the day leans toward rest. The bridge was everything I needed it to be. Dark inside, sweet with the smell of old wood and river. Swallows ticked past in little bursts of wings. I leaned on the railing and watched water shoulder itself against stones. I heard the horse before I saw them. The rhythm of hooves over planks is a sound you feel. The buggy stopped partway through the bridge, and he climbed down, lantern in his hand, though it was not quite night. He came to stand near me, not touching the railing, not touching me. After a moment, he lifted the lantern onto a beam. It lit the space in a low, warm circle. "Thank you for the peach," he said. "Thank you for being the person who stops," I answered. He looked out at the water. "Many of us stop," he said. "You would do the same." "Yes," I said. "I hope so." We did not hurry to fill the quiet. The river had its own conversation, and it was enough for a while. When he spoke again, he did it like a person unscrewing the cap of a jar that was stubborn, not because of the jar, but because of what it had been asked to hold. "I read sometimes," he said. "Not enough to be vain about it. I like when a book is honest." "Me too," I said. "I carry a book in my glove compartment for waiting rooms and long lines. It's my way to remember I'm a person even when I'm a doctor." He smiled a little, that leaf-lifting event. "I like that," he said. "To remember you are a person." The light between us changed as the evening became night. I told him a little about my work, how sometimes a hand on a shoulder lowers a blood pressure better than a pill, how sometimes knowing a grandson's name helps a woman sleep. I told him I was divorced and that I lived alone, by choice, in a house with a creaky stair and a maple tree that dumped leaves like it was trying to make a point. I could hear my voice take on the tone I use when I carry news, gentle and clear, careful not to overload the person receiving it. "I don't talk about my family," he said quietly. "Not because I am ashamed, but because I am careful. You understand?" "I do," I said. "I can listen without asking." He nodded. When he turned to me, the lantern gavels carved out his cheekbones. His eyes were not a color in that light, just a tension. He drew a breath and let it out slowly. "There are parts of me I have never spoken," he said. "I am 32 years old, Daniel. I am not a boy. I am not in a time of running wild. The devotions I have, I chose. But I have learned that sometimes love is a quiet thing that waits at the edge of what you call yourself. I never expected to see you on that road. And now here you are again. I felt the bridge under my feet the way you feel your own bones when someone says a sentence that matters. I placed my hands on the railing so they had something to do other than tremble. "I don't know what to do with this, Eli," I said, and I spoke it like a truth because anything less would be disrespect to the night we stood in. "But I know how to move gently. I know how to go slow. I won't make you explain yourself to me." We met at that bridge 3 times in the weeks that followed. Sometimes we spoke, and sometimes we let the water speak for us. He brought me a loaf of bread once, still warm, wrapped in a clean cloth, sewn with 3 small, even stitches I could not resist touching. I turned it over like it was a living thing and said, "Thank you the way we say thank you in a hospital corridor when someone closes a curtain for you and hands you a moment to breathe." He told me he liked the way the ground smells after rain. He told me he had whittled when he was a boy and still did when his hands wanted to find the shape inside wood. He told me that he had thought his life was settled into a kind, honorable track, and that it was not simple to admit that his heart had learned a tune he did not know it had always wanted to sing. He did not tell me what his bishop would say, or what his parents would do, or what would happen to the life he had built if he stepped away from it. He did not tell me because those were not stories to unpack on a bridge and leave behind like old boards when you crossed to the other side. I told him I had loved before. I did not tell him every detail. I told him that the man I had loved had wanted a city apartment high enough to kiss clouds, and that I had wanted a porch where crickets drafted the air at night. We had parted gently. No slammed doors, but my heart had learned to stay a little guarded, like a nurse who knows where the crash cart is at all times and keeps a mental map. I told him I was not afraid of being alone, but sometimes I heard my house breathe and wished it would answer when I asked how its day had been. On the 4th night, the moon rose late. We stood in the bridge as if we had all the time there had ever been. It was summer still, but you could feel the edge of September in the air, a coolness that touched the back of your neck like a considerate hand reminding you to take a sweater. He had not reached for me, and I had not reached for him. There is a kind of respect that is its own embrace, but the words we used fit closer to our ribs each time we spoke, and finally, without decision, we were nearer, shoulders almost touching. The lantern made little halos on the splinters. When he turned to me, his face was unguarded in a way that made me forget every room I had ever hurried through. He lifted his hand and stopped before my shoulder. He did not assume. He waited. I covered his hand with mine and guided it to rest lightly on my shoulder like a stethoscope. Neither of us moved for a long breath. The world stayed remarkably unbroken by this. The horse stamped once and blew out through its nose. The river talked to stones. Somewhere a frog spoke up like a member of a choir who had learned harmony by ear. "Okay," he said, and it was not a question. "Okay," I echoed. We stayed like that, hand to shoulder. The weight so light I could have convinced you it had not happened. But it had, and the feeling of it did something to my heart that even I, who listen to hearts all day, cannot use a stethoscope to name. This is the part of the story where I wish I could tell you nothing complicated followed. In the practice of medicine, it's tempting to deliver happy outcomes like a parade of numbers trending in the right direction. But lives are not lab values. After that night, the air around us changed. He had not said the word love. Neither had I. But love does not require a label before it enters a room. Someone in his community noticed his absence, or the way his horse stood one evening longer than usual on the road near Walnut Hill. Someone asked him a question he answered honestly, because he will not lie. The details he spared me, but the effect was clear. He came to the bridge with a wind in him. He did not bring the buggy into the bridge, but left it shy of the mouth and came on foot. He did not carry the lantern. The dark felt audible like the hush before a hymn. "I should not be here," he said. "I am sorry." Even in this, he was careful. The words laid out like tools on a cloth, precise, within reach, nothing thrown. I stood the way I stand when a difficult diagnosis aligns with a face I know. My voice remembered to be steady. "You have nothing to apologize for," I said. "Not to me." "They asked me where I go," he said. I could not answer and still keep faith. I asked for time. Time was not granted. My chest tightened, but I did not move closer. "Do you need me to stay away?" "I do not know what I need," he said. His breath went in and out like someone carrying a heavy pail, balanced and constant even when it hurt. "All I know is that I was walking in the night, and I met a man, and parts of me stood up I did not know had been sitting for years. I know that my people are my people. I know that kindness asks us to be careful with one another. Then I will be careful," I said. "We can pause. If you ever want to talk, we can do that with shorter words that don't feel like they might cut." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but not unkind. "You speak like a doctor," he said. "It is the only way I know," I replied. We paused. There is a kind of waiting that is not empty. It is like letting bread rise, like letting grief move through a body without choking it. I did not go to the bridge for 2 weeks. I went for longer walks in my neighborhood. I learned the names of 3 new birds. I called my mother and let her tell me a story about the spring she spent working in a library, how the smell of old pages made her less lonely. In the office, I went a little softer around the edges. When patients apologized for crying, I told them tissues are for using. When someone's blood sugar took a stubborn turn, I reminded them, people are not math problems to be solved. They are stories that you walk with 1 page at a time. Then one night it rained like decisions. The sky opened and the gutters took the river into them and ran with it. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. The number was a landline from an area code that braided together old farmhouses like thread in a quilt. A woman's voice, steady as a porch, asked for me by first and last name, and then said this: "We have a mother in labor and no progress. We have called for the midwife and for what the English call ambulance. They are delayed by a tree on the road. There is also an older man with chest pain and we cannot leave him to drive. We understand you are a doctor who is kind, and you have said once to someone we know that you could answer questions at night. It is not unusual for my neighbors to know my work, but the path from my business card to this phone call went through a place I knew, a bridge in the dark, a peach in a hand. Give me the address, I said. If I can arrive before the ambulance, I can start things. I won't do anything outside my scope. I will be respectful. We believe you, she said. She gave me directions in landmarks more than street names. I wrote them down, said I was on my way, and grabbed the small duffel I keep packed for situations like the church health fair or a sports field mishap, or now this. Blood pressure cuffs, stethoscope, a portable oxygen tank, pads to check an EKG, gloves, antiseptic wipes, gentle voice. I drove carefully, hazards blinking when the rain came so hard it erased the road. The farmhouse was white and clean and lit from within by practical, generous light. Mennonite women worked with quiet efficiency. The laboring mother, calm and fierce, pushed with a kind of strength I have only seen there, where love demands muscle and surrender. The older man's face was gray with the flat sheet of pain that makes language a stranger. I sat with him. I placed the pads, listened, pressed, asked. We breathed together. I explained what I heard, not as threat but as information. Your heart is speaking loudly. The ambulance is coming. You are not alone. A younger man ran inside and ran back out with an umbrella for the gurney when it arrived. The EMTs were neighborly and competent. We talked in short sentences that meant miles. In the churn, I saw him. Eli stood in the doorway like a question that had learned manners. His hat was gone. His hair was rain-slicked and clung to his forehead. He saw me, and the way surprise passed over his face was not panic, but something more like relief, tempered by the discipline of a man who knows he cannot drop a glass even when he is startled. He did not approach. He watched me work, and in that watching I felt not scrutiny, but something I can only call a joining. We were both occupied by the greater task of keeping people safe. The older man went in the ambulance. The laboring mother's baby arrived with a cry that cut through rain like a small comet lighting up a dark page. I stood still for a moment and let my shoulders register what they had been doing. Then I stepped outside to the covered porch, where rain drummed its steady hymn. Eli followed me, and we stood side by side, palms on the railing like men at sea learning the shape of a deck beneath their feet. He did not touch me. He did not need to. "Thank you," he said, his voice so rough with feeling it made my own throat close. I shook my head. "I did my job," I said. "You knew who to call. Thank the woman who called. Thank your community for trusting me." He nodded. We looked out at the yard where the rain made every blade of grass bright as a new idea. He drew in air and let it go. "There is a place near the old oak where the road widens," he said. "Tomorrow night, if you are willing, I can walk there at 9. "Only if it is what you want," I said. "Not to fill a space that is empty. Not to cause you harm. I am already walking," he said. "You are not the harm. You are the light I can see my feet by." The next night, the rain had spent itself. The world felt scrubbed. The moon looked younger. I parked where the road widened and turned off the engine. The silence that came around me felt like an old friend. He walked out of the dark with no horse, no buggy, just his steady gait and his hands at his sides. He stopped an arm's length away. Up close, his eyes in that night were not blue, not brown, not a color at all. They were the feeling you get when someone calls your name in a way that makes you believe you can do the hard thing and still be yourself on the other side. "I cannot be careless," he said. "I have made promises. They do not cancel me having a heart." "I won't ask you to," I said. "I have no interest in taking you from anything. If there is a path we can walk without tearing up the ones you already use, we will find it." He took a breath. "I do not know how to name what is mine and what belongs to the people I love," he said. "I only know that when I am near you, the day's sharp edges soften, and I can hear the river in me instead of the grind." "That is enough for a beginning," I said. He stepped closer. We did not kiss that night. We sat on the small lip of grass by the road and let our shoulders lean, and I felt the length of our spines align like a pair of clean boards in a careful build. We talked about ordinary things you can trust. how he liked to milk at dawn when the world is quiet, the way the metal pail sings a little when a stream hits it, how I have a patient who keeps bees and brought me a jar of honey so pure it tasted like clover light. He told me he had once carved a wooden bird for a child who'd been sick, the way the child's hand felt light when she held it. I told him I have a drawer full of drawings given to me by small hands, and that on hard days I take one out and remember all the ways people say thank you without using letters. We made a practice of caution. We met at night twice a month, no pattern to it anyone could predict. Sometimes we walked, sometimes we sat, sometimes we stood and simply let the same air pass through both of us. He never lied. When asked where he had been, he answered truthfully enough without goring his own spirit. He said he had been walking. He said he had been listening. He said he had been breathing and letting the world show him where he was. No one asked him to confess more. Not then. I have spoken a long time without telling you we kissed. You might be waiting for it, thinking perhaps that this is a story where lips transform everything. I am a doctor, and I will tell you this. The first time we kissed, I checked in with him the way I would with a patient before I do something that asks their body to trust me. I looked at him. He looked back. Yes? I asked with my eyes. He answered with his. It was not a dramatic kiss. It was a single careful press, as tender as laying a hand on a fevered brow. It did not set off fireworks. It set off something more valuable, a series of small, steady lamps inside my chest that lit a path I didn't know I had been walking toward for years. He pulled back first, not with haste but with purpose, to make sure we were both still ourselves. All right, he said, and I knew that word would be the way we would proceed, step by step. All right, check the ground, find the next steady point. When autumn came, his work changed shape. He spent long days gathering in. I saw him less. He sent me a small thing, a carved wooden bird, plain and perfect, its wings tucked as if mid-rest. There was no note, only the bird wrapped in cloth and left in a place we had agreed on beneath a stone near the bridge. I held it and felt my throat catch. I do not cry easily in my own life, but in the lives of my patients I allow tears to teach me. I let this one come while my house drew the early dark around itself and the maple tree outside learned how to let go. I wrote to him once. The letter said nothing dangerous. It said, I'm making soup and thinking of the way you stand when you are listening, your head slightly to the side as if you are making space in your mind for my words. It said, I bought a warmer coat because the winter will come and I intend to continue walking. It said, I am here. I folded it and kept it. It felt safer to be unspoken than to put paper between us that could be found. I learned in those months to speak into the night and trust it not to betray me. The thing about communities is that they are living. They adjust, they resist, they hold, they push. In late November, something in his set of obligations tugged hard. A brother needed him for a barn raising that had been delayed by weather. An elder asked him to lead a prayer at a gathering. A nephew, curious and bright, wanted to sit by him at supper. He told me this in the careful, present-tense way of a man reporting a weather he cannot alter, only respect. I sat in my car after those nights and did not turn on the radio because I needed to hear the way my own heart was reacting. I felt not jealousy, but grief's small cousin. The ache that comes when something good comes with a cost you cannot pay for the other person. If this story makes it sound like all we did was meet and part and meet again, I am failing you. Gifts came with the difficulty. He taught me to hear a field. I taught him to stretch the tendons in his hands after long work to keep his wrists from aching in winter. He showed me the difference between the smell of hay and straw. I showed him how to check his pulse at his wrist and count it while breathing, 4 beats in, 6 out, letting his nervous system learn calm from the inside. He had learned to be careful with himself because the world had taught him that being careless with a person is a kind of misuse. I watched him learn to be generous with himself too. We could not exist indefinitely in that between place. The day arrived like a slow tide and then crashed up against both of us at once. He wrote me a letter, not on paper, not at first, but in the way he walked onto the road one night and kept walking until he was near enough to speak without raising his voice. I need a different kind of time, he said. I have asked and walked and thought and prayed and stood still long enough for my feet to cool on the stones, and what I know is this: I cannot ask my heart to be quiet again now that it has learned a new sound. I also cannot ask my family to celebrate something they do not understand. There is a man, kind, who speaks gently. At a counseling place the Mennonite women know. He is plain but not in my church. I will speak to him. I will say the word I am afraid to say. I will ask what a loyal life looks like if I do not return to the path I thought I would walk until I died. I will walk to that door with you, I said. You cannot, he said, not unkindly. This is a door I must open alone. But you can wait for me outside in the night, like a lantern. I did that. I drove him as far as the end of the lane. He went on foot, because that is how steps like that must be taken. I parked under a maple tree whose leaves rattled like gentle applause in the breeze. I rolled down my window and let the cool air braid itself through my hair. I waited. I watched the entrance, not because I wanted to see through it, but because it is a holy thing to guard a threshold for someone you love. He came out an hour later. His face was the face of a man who has been given a diagnosis that will not go away and told there is a way to live with it that will take courage. He came to the car and got in. We sat in the quiet. He said my heart is not a fault, he told me. He said it is a piece of me like a skill I have kept hidden. It is not hidden anymore, I said. He closed his eyes. I cannot stay, he said. Not as I have been. There is a way to leave without hatred. It will hurt those I love. It will take more carefulness than I have ever used. But there is a small house I know of on a road where the English live. The man who rents it does not mind if the person who lives there does not turn on every light. The door faces east. It is not a worldly house. It is a shelter. Then, I said slowly, feeling the weight of his words the way I weigh medication dosages with care. If you choose that, I will be there not to carry you, but to carry a little weight with you when your hands are full. He did leave. It was not dramatic. There were no slammed doors or shouted words or broken plates. There were tears and there were tight fists and there were prayers. He did not speak ill of anyone. He did not ask me to be a replacement for a community. He brought with him only what he needed: a trunk with clothes, his Bible, a small handful of tools, the carved bird he had made me, which he insisted I keep because it had lived with me long enough to belong. He came to the little house and opened its door and breathed. He slept the first night with tears drying on his face, and when he woke, he went outside and stood in the yard and turned his face slightly toward the sun coming up. And if he prayed, he did it so quietly no neighbor could have heard. I am telling you this as if it happened all at once. It did not. It took months. He finished obligations the way a craftsman finishes a dovetail joint, cleanly with respect. He spoke to his parents. He did not explain more than was kind. He accepted the consequences of his truth. He asked for nothing he had not earned. He came to me not as a man looking for someone to rescue him, but as a man who had rescued himself by walking carefully through the dark to the place where the dawn was waiting and saying, "All right." We set up his house together the way two men who have learned patience do. I taught him how to light the pilot on the old stove without fear. He taught me to mend my shirt rather than toss it when a cuff began to wear. He made a chair that fit my body as accurately as if he'd traced me with his eyes. I stocked the kitchen with simple food. We bought a kettle that sang a little when it was ready. We did not rush. If you had watched us through those days, you might have thought we were simply two friends creating a space. You would not have been wrong. Love is not less because it is careful. It is more. We put a small lamp by the door that we could leave on at night without waking the house. He continued to meet with the counselor. I went to some meetings with him, not as the doctor who knew the right thing to say, but as the man who would, if asked, say, "Yes, this is how his voice sounds when he is hurt, and no, he does not need permission to feel joy." I learned not to be an expert. I learned to be a witness. He learned words for himself he had not had before. He held them like tools and used them when they served him and set them down when they did not. We did not parade our affection. We did not hide it either. We were two men who lived in neighboring towns who walked together sometimes in the evening and who bought our groceries where the manager knew my name and his face. If someone asked, we were each other's person. If no one asked, the world did not end. There were still hard nights. He would sit with his hands on his knees and stare at a spot on the floor and not see it because he was seeing a memory that had his chest in its fist. I learned to lean on the doorway to be there without crowding him. He learned to let me sit close enough that our knees touched and to say, "Stay," when he needed me not to go and pretend he had it all under control. We got good at soup. We got good at laundry. We got good at reading to each other out loud and stopping at a sentence when it said something true and letting the truth sit there, as distinguishing and ordinary as a working light. Once in winter, we stood out behind his house while snow made the world quiet and new. He put his hand in mine, not because he needed help walking, but because he had learned that help is not always a sign of lack. It is a sign of belonging. He looked at me and said, "I do not have the words for vows yet. But if I were to make them, I would promise to tell you when I am scared, to listen when you are tired, to feed the birds in the morning because it makes your face soften, and to hold the lantern for you when you have a flat tire in your spirit. I would promise," I said, "to make sure there is always a blanket where you need one, to ask before I assume, to keep a steady light in the window, and to remember that your carefulness is a gift, not a wall." We didn't need the state to know it. But we walked down to the courthouse one Tuesday and signed papers that made our partnership visible to the kind of places where signatures matter. We did it with no fanfare. I wore a sweater my mother had knit me for good luck. He wore a clean shirt with that neat mend at the cuff. The clerk smiled at us like a person who has seen enough days to be unshocked by joy. We went home and made stew and ate it with slices of bread he had baked that morning, steam rising like a confession that no one would hold against us. There were, as there always are, people who disapproved. Not loud, mostly. A few kept their eyes low. A few kept their mouths tight. He nodded at them the way a man nods at a field he will not plant in. He did not argue. He was not a missionary for his own life. He was living it. He saw his parents when it was possible. He did not force them to accept what they could not. He brought them produce when they needed it and building help when a door sagged on its hinges. He was the same son he had always been, with a different house. If their love bent around him and could not hold him the way it once did, he still walked where their road and his road touched and did not salt it. I have told you many small things. I will tell you a few more. He taught me to sit at the edge of the bed in the morning and let my feet find the floor and be grateful for it before I stood. I taught him that stretching his calves before a long walk prevented the dull pull he used to get behind his knees. He taught me to sit by the window in rain and not attempt to fill the time with anything but that. I taught him there are socks that are warm enough to redeem a February. He taught me that if you keep a lantern clean, it does not smoke up the glass. I taught him that if you check the batteries on the smoke alarm, the house will complain less in the middle of the night. He did not stop being Amish just because he no longer kept all the ordnung. The part of him that worked with his hands and loved mornings and honored stillness did not fall away. He kept some ways, not because he feared electricity or comfort, but because the simpler path continued to be the truest one for him. We have a phone. We have a car. We also have a way of standing in the yard at night without any of those things and letting the dark know we are not afraid. When spring came again, the bridge felt different. We went there together at dusk with a picnic basket that held bread and apples and a small wedge of cheese wrapped in paper. We sat inside the span and let the sound of the river stitch us back to the first time we had stood there, when our only bravery was to be honest without asking for more. He took my hand. The light through the slats patterned our skin like patchwork. "We met at night," he said, and his voice had that soft wonder in it that makes my doctor's heart close and open at once, like a fist unclenching. "It was not an accident." "No," I said. "You were at the right place with your lantern." I had a flat tire and a trunk full of blood pressure cuffs and a middle-aged man's exhaustion. "You said your name like a promise to be kind." I heard it. He turned a little more toward me, and, in the bridge that had held our words and our quiet for a year, he kissed me. It was not more dramatic than the first, but it went deeper, as if we had built a room for our mouths to meet in that had light enough and no sharp corners. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. We stayed like that until the lantern's small circle of light did not matter anymore, because the night itself felt like an embrace that had given consent. Do not know what kind of story you thought the Amish man I met at night would be. but I hope you accept the one this is. Not scandal, not a sermon, not a story where one man saves another from a life he did not understand. We met where we were. We moved gently. We asked permission and we granted it. We learned to speak when we needed to and to listen when we did not. We made a home that is quiet enough to hear the wind change direction. I go to work in the mornings and listen to the line between lungs and throat. He builds a bench and then sands it until the edges are soft enough for old hands to hold. In the evening, we drink tea and he reads me a paragraph from a book he has never admitted to anyone else he loves. I check the locks. He checks the lantern. Between us, the night is not empty. It is full of everything we have chosen to keep, the slow drum of our own hearts, the patience of a horse at a roadside, the bridge that still remembers our footfalls, and a small carved bird that sits on our windowsill, its wings gathered close as if ready to lift at a touch.